Tessa, why do you think Beloved made such a big impact when it came out?
Probably for lots of different reasons. It's a very strange novel. In the centre of it is a naked pregnant ghost, so that's not something people are used to. I think it's also perhaps the taboo of, or breaking the taboo of speaking about slavery, which conventionally in American culture wasn't something talked about until this century. It's a sort of buried secret or a dark secret from the past. And probably also because it does such a brilliant job in writing so beautifully and emotively about that subject.
It's written in quite a difficult way, though, isn't it, with multiple narratives? Is that partly to convey the whole sense of alienation that slaves felt?
Well, Morrison has written in a recent preface to the novel that she wanted to provide no introduction or no lobby to this novel to give people the experience of being alienated as if they were snatched from one place and put in another, as slaves were. Although in some ways I think that's quite an ambitious project for a book. It does defamiliarise its subject because it starts with a description of a haunted house and we don't really know where we are or what's happening.
So we're plunged into something very that we don't really understand.
So we have to work very hard to piece the meaning together and sort out the chronology, which is disrupted. There are many flashbacks in time, and piece together the different people's stories to work out what actually happened, the central action of the novel. But I think that's also a lot about disrupting the idea of one authoritative narrative voice, so that there's not only one right answer here.
One male narrative voice, presumably, too.
Yeah, I think, there's an assumption with an omniscient third-person voice that this is the truth, this is what happened. Whereas if we look at this central action of a mother's murder of her own child, it's told in at least 3 or 4 different ways. And the main character, Tessa, literally circulates her kitchen as she tries to explain what happened and why. And the idea is that there are many different perspectives or different ways of telling what happened, so that there isn't just one truth. And the whole idea of judgment, I think, is problematised, so that there's not necessarily a clear right or wrong here.
And Morrison coins this phrase re-memory, doesn't she? As if the conventional way we remember things might be wrong and you have to re-remember them.
I think the idea of memory works on lots of different levels in the novel. So she uses this word re-memory, which, as you say, she's invented as both a noun and a verb. So one of the characters says, "Oh, I re-memory that." And then Tessa talks about something in her re-memory. And one level on which that works is the idea of the nation's sort of cultural memory, and it may have constructed certain versions of the past or of history which tell a certain account of slavery and of slave owners and what being an African-American woman or a black woman in the 19th century involved. And in some ways, the voices or the memories of those people's experience have been erased from the sort of historical record through a lot of sentimentality about the Civil War or the idea of a sort of romantic reunion between North and South. And so Morrison wants to revisit the past and tell a different story about it and hear different voices or make those voices heard. And so it's the concept of re-memory combines sort of revision with remembering, I think, sort of revising the narratives of the past. And perhaps also in that idea of remembering is an idea of sort of literally bringing bodies back together, so as an opposite of dismembering, which is sort of a metaphorical idea for what slavery did.
Yeah. And of course at the heart of the novel is this chilling episode in which Seth, as a mother, kills one of her children to stop that child being taken into slavery. Do we feel at the end that that action is justified?
I guess that's the question that defines the novel, and it's difficult to come down on one side or the other. An important historical context is that this is based on or inspired by a real woman called Margaret Garner, who lived in Kentucky in the middle of the century and did attack her children and kill one of them at the moment of her recapture into slavery. And there are various eyewitness accounts of that, and this became a cause célèbre for abolitionists. And I think what's important is it's through the motherhood, through Seth's making her own choice or exerting freedom of will, that Morrison manages to protest the tenets of slavery, so that slaves aren't human beings, therefore they can be enslaved, and slavery is a justified system. Whereas, rather like a Greek tragic heroine or hero, Seth asserts an autonomy and makes a choice, a bold choice, and we may we may not be able to identify with that choice, or we may applaud it, we may think she did the right thing. I think in some ways, Morrison makes us sympathise with her too much. We can lose touch with the violence of what this act actually involved, and we get so far into Seth's mind that we think, oh, well, that's a perfectly normal thing to do, to kill your child to prevent them returning to slavery. But it's also a common trope in slave narratives that death is preferable to slavery. So she's playing with that idea.
How depressing is the novel in the end? Is there a sense of the sort of, that having done all this rememory and that a ghost has been laid to rest, so to speak, and there is a feeling that it's not entirely bleak?
The ghost is definitely exorcised. You know, the first thing is this is very much a real ghost, and then it definitely disappears. And in some ways, the ending of the novel is very positive.
This is the ghost of the child.
The ghost of the child, who then grows up into this strange, pregnant woman, but then the community come and exorcise her. So she's gone, and there is a sense of a future there where Setha and someone she's in a relationship with called Paul D have a reunion, and he tells her, you need to, it sounds very corny, but it isn't really, that she needs to sort of value herself instead of worrying about this ghost. And now that she's confronted the past, she can move on. And he says, we need some kind of tomorrow. And you could hear all the, trumpets playing at this point. But what makes it fascinating to me is the epilogue, which takes you by surprise and undercuts that sense of a definite happy future, I think, because the epilogue returns to the sadness of this baby or child that lost her life, and it dwells on these footprints that come and go, and it says, if you look for her, she's there, but if you don't look, she'll be forgotten, no one's claiming her. And so it unsettles all the sense of appeasement and atonement and justice, and makes us think again, gosh, what did slavery involve? Has there been atonement for that? What is the future in terms of a racially mixed America? So for me, the brilliance of the book's in that epilogue, I think.
Not all critics have warmed to it, have they? How successful do you think it is as a novel?
I suppose the first thing to say in answer to that is Morrison's always a writer who's attracted controversy and tends to polarise critics. And when the New York Times voted it the best novel of the last 25 years, a few years back, there was an outcry in some quarters.
On the grounds that there are people who thought it wasn't? Well,
people claimed she wasn't a literary giant, and why didn't Roth win, or why didn't Updike win? To me, it's an absolutely fabulous novel, partly because of the way Morrison combines the personal and the political, and somehow we believe in these characters and their individual psychological lives and struggles, but at the same time this is on a huge epic canvas, and she does manage to say something about the whole of American history. And secondly, the language is extraordinarily beautiful, the imagery is often unusual. And thirdly, because I think it refuses to resolve itself into, yes, Seth did the right thing, or no, Seth's a criminal, or yes, there is a future that looks better, or no, the past will always haunt us. So in leaving us in a sort of indeterminate place, that's where its success lies, I think.